Mr. Rob. Hey.
Well, man, how's it going, Tom?
It's going?
All right.
Welcome. Come on, sit on down. We got a lot to talk about.
What's the last talking?
Welcome to the behind the scenes of what it takes to run a YouTube channel. Thank you for being here. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell anybody that it takes a lot of guts to do what Rob is about to do today. Thank you for that. And we are hoping with the intention of sharing all this information with you guys that it will help somebody. What we're talking about today is Rob's journey on how he went from what you would assume is pretty much strapped for cash all the time to what feels like almost a breath of fresh air, I would imagine, right?
Absolutely.
Like some freedom you have some freedom now.
So
Rob, when all this started, like when he approached me, he had a different job and he was talking about trying to get into investments because there was something going on with crypto in the world, and he thought, well, maybe I can make some money on that. So you called me, right? You said, hey, Tom, I'm thinking about doing this thing with crypto. And what did I went on to like a nerd rant for like an hour about anti-crypto. What was going through your mind as I was just getting into the financial side of this stuff?
Same thing that everybody wants to achieve, trying to get ahead and get rich through investments. And I thought crypto was the way to do that, with all the hype in the news, and started dabbling with the crypto. And then you started talking about stocks and all that. I'm like, hey, this guy knows what he's doing. Let's run this by him and see what his thoughts are. And I was quite surprised when I did tell you, because I thought you would say, oh yeah, crypto's a good idea. You should do this and that. But right away, you shut it down. You asked me an important question. Why are you investing in crypto? And I really couldn't give you an answer for that. My answer was more or less of doing what I thought everyone else was doing to get rich. Jumping on the bandwagon, per se.
The conversation evolved from there. It became more of a conversation of like financial management and the situation that you were in, and we talked a little bit about your finances. And later on, obviously not in the first conversation, we got into all spreadsheets and all sorts of in-depth ways on how we can help you get into a position to invest. Because the bottom line of the conversation was that at the beginning of it, hey, I was thinking about investing, and when we got into the why, the question was surrounding more like, can you afford to invest? Do you have your debt paid off? Are you in a good position financially so that you can invest? And we uncovered some things. I think I asked you, do you have 6 months of expenses? And then it kept going into, well, how many credit cards do you have? What kind of debt do you have? What are your house payments and like your car payments? And we got into all the numbers. And I think at one point I asked you, if you're going to pay a 5% interest over here and credit cards are like 20%. I mean, credit card rates are just ridiculous. Why would you pay for an investment that pays like 2 or 3%? At that point, I think you realized that there are some things with your money management that needed to be adjusted.
That's correct.
When you got to that point, when did you realize that, hey, something's wrong here?
So I was really gung-ho to start investing. I wanted to get ahead and achieve the dream of being rich through investing. And I thought that, okay, crypto's the way to go. But when I was talking to you about it, you really enlightened me. I think I was caught up more in the feelings and emotion of the aspects of investing with crypto and it being a new platform and way to invest. And I never thought about the current obligations and debt and really going backwards. It doesn't make sense to invest until you clear those debts out, like you brought to my attention. Shortly after that, I was surprised with some past obligations from many years ago, about 6 years ago, that came up out of nowhere. I mean, I I guess you should never assume that those things will disappear. And that was one of my mistakes, taking the path of least resistance, being distracted with new careers, being a newer parent. Those things just kind of fell behind. The straw that broke the camel's back really was when those things came back and reared their heads back up. And
How did that happen?
it was it was really humiliating. Unfortunately, it happened during my executive position. I had some legal obligations that came up in the forms of garnishments, and I'm the executive. And it was a big reality check for me. And I realized that at that point in time that something's not right. I also discovered I was at the red line of my finances and budgeting, because when those came into play, it really affected the income to the point where I was like going negative. And I'm like, okay, what am I going to do about this? So we had to live really tough. And there was consequences that came with that. And unfortunately, they were rough, but we earned that. And also help rebuild the character when it comes to financial stewardship. And I feel like moving forward with the knowledge that I've been learning from you guys, helping me, it's really helping me get on the path that I need to be.
You were caught up in this, the American way, right?
Right.
You work and then you sleep.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And as long as you have money in the bank, then you have money to spend. And I think one thing that's lost in American society today is the ability to budget. I think that's one thing that you're saying that you did not accomplish, is you didn't budget
Correct.
all of your expenses and all of your income to figure out exactly how much money you had to spend.
I think as Americans, we tend to get an entitled attitude because we work so hard. And I'm going to speak for myself, but I think a majority of us grew up with the blue collar mentality. You know, you work hard until you retire, and that's how you live. And when I decided that I wanted to better myself through my career and getting into an executive position, I went from being hourly to salary, and my wages increased significantly quickly.
Yeah, but then you figure out, at least this is what happened for me, when I went to salary, I was like, oh, I'm getting a pay raise. And then I figured how many hours I was working per week. And then I thought, wait a minute.
I could have made more in overtime.
I would have made more in overtime.
Then also there's a lifestyle creep, whereas now you're making $80,000 a year and you think, oh, I got so much more money and I can get a better car, better house, better
Right.
go out to eat
Exactly
more.
what we did, you know. I grew up, unfortunately, not having all the things that I would have liked to have. You know, we were taken care of well growing up, but we were not in a position growing up to where we would know what it's like to have money. And when I finally got there, I'm like, oh, I'm going to make sure my kids don't feel what I felt. And, you know, we didn't spoil them, but I wanted to make sure that they were comfortable. And we did a lot of that. And looking back, it's like we could have done things a lot better. We could have started investing back then, could have started saving. But most importantly, we could have took a look at the big picture and realized that our lifestyle needed to change. And you guys have helped me do that. I appreciate that.
And that's a big point, is this is a lifestyle change and not just a plan that you put in place for a little while to get ahead. You have to change how you relate to money completely and going forward.
That's a hard thing to do.
It is.
I
It's
mean,
very
especially in this culture. So you would say the life circumstance that you had to do with like the work culture that you were in, the atmosphere that you grew up in, all of that got you into the situation that you were in. And your advice to other people how to avoid that, like what would you tell them if somebody was getting caught up in that?
Number one, stop spending. If you don't have it, you don't have it. I would definitely advise people to seek a mentor. If there's somebody who you know who is doing well, ask them. Don't hold it in and just struggle on your own and slowly fall on your own sword.
What was that like?
It was tough, but looking at the bigger picture, I wanted to do everything I can for my family and myself to better myself. And meeting you, clearly you guys know what you're doing, the things you've showed me and shared with me. And I'm like, you know what? I want to strive to achieve that.
And pride is a pretty hard, jagged little pill to swallow when it comes to this.
It is.
And nobody wants to talk
yeah.
about finance, and it's kind of a taboo subjects. And when you do find that person, chances are you got to get it out of them. Not everybody is willing to just spew out their financial laundry just to anyone. You kind of have to be a really good relationship to do that.
You got to be comfortable in your own shoes. I mean, it takes a lot, and so thank you. I mean, it takes a lot just to get to the point where you're like, hey, I need to call Tom. I want to improve my situation. It takes a lot just to put yourself out there like that.
And kudos to you for putting yourself out there to help in this situation, because not everybody will.
After our phone call, so we started talking about like, hey, I'm gonna get your finance together. We're gonna put a spreadsheet together. And I think it was like, we talked for like 3 hours. It was a long call. My wife even came up in the middle of the call. She's like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm talking to her about finance. She goes, again? I'm like, yes, again. So after we got off the phone, I was talking to my wife. We're going to bed, and she was like, so what was that all about? I says, I think I'm gonna help Rob get out of his situation. She's like, another one. I says, yeah. I says, I think he's going to listen this time. That's our side of it. Like, when you got off the phone, what was going through your head? You're just like, well, hey, Tom is going to help me with this. Did you have any premonition of like how hard it would be, like what you'd have to do? What did you tell your wife?
It's going to kind of sound cliche to say this, but anybody who's ever went to therapy before, you're kind of listening to someone telling you what you already know. But there were some aspects that I did not know, which were very helpful, and some ideas that you have been doing.
Like, what were they? Well, if you remember, it was a while ago. So,
ahead on utilities. I never once thought about doing that. When I'm paying bills, my old thought process was, well, that's what the bill is. We got to pay it, and that's it, and be done with it. Never once thought about getting ahead.
Later on, we got into a spreadsheet. I had Rob put together a budget, and I just said, put everything on there. Like, just put everything on there. And you did that. And the reason why we did that is I wanted to have him see the interest of all the debt that was there, the credit cards, the car payments, the house, the everything that was on your personal budget, the interest rates. Yeah, so when I shared that with you, so what we did is we took all of that and we put in, of all those payments, what the monthly interest by itself was. Like, when you saw that number, it was like over $1,000.
It was a huge reality check. It really brought clarity to the whole situation, and I realized quickly where I screwed up. And even if we would have done all that correctly, even with the garnishment, we would have been okay.
Probably could have bought all that stuff anyway, just
right
over time.
Yep. And we had that thought process that everyone does, like, oh, I have enough to pay that. I can make that payment. We're good. And that's how we were living. And also not paying attention where the spending was going. We'd take the kids out to an event like Great Wolf Lodge or something for a weekend, and like, oh yeah, that costs a lot more than we thought it was going to.
There goes $1,500.
Man, those resort hotels, like, you think, oh, it's just the room rate. Oh, no. Once they got you in the room, they got you. Yeah. You're going to spend a lot of money.
Yeah. Buy this $100 magic wand.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love it.
And they're all like that. It's not just that one. So we finally got everything on a spreadsheet. We got it all to the point where we understood what it was. I think you talked to your wife about like the interest by itself, but then we had to put together a plan. So we put everything on the spreadsheet. We said, all right, we know what we're spending, we know what we make, we know where the difference is. And then some things happened. Like, you had to make some adjustments, but something happened before with one of your cars, like before we could even start. And one of the things I was going to ask you, because I never was in this position where I had to dig myself out like that. So it's really fascinating for me to learn what people had to do, because I think one of the most misunderstood things about learning how to be financial stewards, like the lifestyle change, it's just like going to the gym. The first time you go to the gym, it kind of sucks the day after. I mean, you're sore for like the whole week.
Right.
Finances are not that different. Like, even the smallest steps can be very painful, because it's a lifestyle change. You're used to certain habits. You're used to, like, you're making the same amount now, or actually a little bit more than you were then, but it's the way you spent your money is completely changed. What was it like to not only get everybody on board with changing the lifestyle, what was it like just to take the first step?
It was bittersweet. I mean, it was exciting because it was a change, and there was hope to get out of this without having to keep dealing with pain, the pain points of the hardships of not having the things you want when you want them, and also the effect from the garnishment that made things really tough. We had At one point in time, we had 3 vehicles, which was nice to have an extra vehicle. But when that happened, got a little behind on that. We had to let the van go.
What were the first steps that you had to take? Because we took the spreadsheet, and you know this. Every time there was an expense, I'm like, no, no, we're not going to spend any of this. And I imagine you probably got some pushback from a little bit in the family, but
Sure.
Just trying to make that change by itself. Like, what was the first step that you had to make from our first conversations on the spreadsheet, and how hard was it?
So the first step was ensuring that the income was, as soon as it comes in, that the spreadsheet is addressed and we know what's going out, and knowing the finances instead of just paying the bill. I'm like, okay, we can spend the rest. That's kind of how it used to be. Pay the bills off, whatever's left over, we get to have fun. And yeah, we had fun, but when reality came with in the form of a garnishment, it wasn't fun anymore. We had to deal with the hardships with that, and also the humiliation. It was tough. We really had to double down on what was going out, and making sure, is this a want or a need, or can we live without it?
So cutting out Starbucks every day.
Yeah, cutting out. We started being more efficient with groceries, eliminating going out to eat, trying to cut down traveling, which is kind of impossible with our family. We have school of choice, and currently right now I do travel a little far for work, but I'm compensated very well for it, so that's very good. So besides that, the toughest part I would say is just getting in the habit and breaking free from the good habits and breaking free from the bad habits. Because as humans, we're creatures of habit, and you become a little spoiled. Honestly, when we had the income change, it was kind of nice. When you're growing up the way I did, then you have a nice paycheck, a good salary. Like, hey, we get to do things that we never got to do before.
Right.
Hindsight's always 20/20. Wish you could go back and take care of those obligations then and start the portfolio. That is the goal here, is to get to investing.
How much debt did you have that you had to dig out of?
Oh, I would say it totaled,
Including the cars.
So are we talking about normal debt or the debt that was out of control that put me past the red line? Because everybody carries debt.
All of it.
So if we're talking the vehicles,
Excluding the house.
okay, so I would say about approximately $100,000 total.
Which is significant. Even like $200,000 is manageable if you do it properly. But yeah, 100 grand is a lot. And it's not out of norm for what a lot of other people have.
It's funny when you talk to people about finances, some of the people that are the worst with their finances tend to be doctors and hiring
That make the
attorneys
most.
and stuff. Yeah.
$250,000 a year and nothing to show for it in debt.
Yeah, I think you guys touched on something very important there. I will admit I also developed a slight sense of entitlement after, growing up, struggling. And then I'm like, hey, I busted my butt off to get to this position here. I earned it. I'm making good money, so I work hard. I'm going to play hard. And I guess that's okay if you manage it correctly, but if you get out of control again, and it can happen pretty quick too.
To anybody.
Real quick.
And playing hard's fine as long as you're a good steward to your money.
Absolutely. I agree with that. For me, I was making enough money to where we could get by. It was tough. It was really tough. And there were some times where we had to rob Peter to pay Paul to shuffle some of the bills around, and that's where some of the credit cards came in. But once we got that debt paid off, you start seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, and it feels great.
When did you start to realize that you're going from a lifestyle of money controlling you to you being able to control your money?
I would say that would be the day that I got to cut up the credit cards and call the company up and be like, hey, we want to close our account. And
You seemed pretty happy that day. I remember talking to you on the phone. He's like, it started. Like you were just so excited.
It felt good.
How long did it take from the time you started the process to being able to cut up your credit cards?
It was about a year, a little over a year.
So it's a
Yeah.
It's a long process, and
It
you
is.
got to be diligent.
Yep. You have to be diligent, and I would say that spreadsheet is paramount for success. And the other thing is getting everybody on board. Everyone's got to be on board.
You had to live underneath Tom's crushing thumb of financial cheapness. Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.
Goodness. What was it like to be like, because we scrutinized everything.
Yes.
Absolutely everything. And if somebody's going through this, they're starting to change their path. Like, what was it like to live underneath that? And if somebody else was starting to do the same thing, but they faltered in that path, what would you tell them?
I would say, remember the dark and painful times that you're dealing with those financial hardships. Use that for motivation and inspiration. You can continue to live like that, or you can continue to not live like that. It's your choice, really. Lifestyle choices are important. And the other thing I would say too that's important is mental health. Take care of yourself. I'm not gonna make excuses, but during the pandemic, I was in a healthcare leadership role. And from when it first started really to 2021, I was a little depressed. It was difficult. We all know what happened during that time, and it was like another helpless feeling where you feel like you just don't have control of anything. And it was easy for me just to check out and not really focus on what I should have been. I was focusing more on my career instead of my finances. And my career came with a lot of challenges, but it was a good thing what we were doing, helping the community. But if you are dealing with depression, I would say you need to get that addressed too, because mental health, in my opinion, goes hand in hand with financial health. If you are not in a good position with your mental health, then you're most likely going to make decisions that you're going to regret later on. And when you're already dealing with hardships, you don't want to double down on hardships and have more on your back.
Would you say that some of the debt, interest, and payments themselves contributed to the mental health problem? Like, just for anybody who would have to make payments, would that contribute to the stress?
Just the weight of the realization of how much you owe.
For anybody who's in that deep, when you realize that, it sucks, obviously, but you're already just kind of numb and burnt out.
Right.
And it's important to not feel that way, because that can take away from your consistency and moving forward. And you don't want that to happen, because it's a lot of work to do it, but it's worth it.
Rob, you've gotten to a point now where money's not controlling you. You've got the better half of it. You've got a lot of equity. Most of your debt is gone, and you have a black number instead of a red number at the end of the month, and the garnishment's gone. When you had it and you had it all there, when you said staying consistent, how many times were you tempted to break it? On a wait, daily, weekly, monthly,
Hourly?
We had to a few times, because even though you put it together, there's always some surprises that come out or things that you didn't plan for. But as far as the things like the wants, it wasn't hard for me, at least, because we don't want to look back, and I want to leave that all behind. It's not worth going back to that. Especially, it's humiliating when you're in an executive position and you make good money, but you don't have anything to show for it.
Tell me more about some of the surprises that you've encountered.
So one thing that I would really suggest that's important, when you're doing this and you're doing the restart and breaking everything down, do an in-depth credit check. Look to see if there's anything out there that you might not know of or forgot about. Because the last thing you want to have happen is you're getting everything straightened out, things are looking well, and all of a sudden, surprise!
There's more.
We've come to ruin the party.
That was something, I will admit, every time I would call Rob, as we're doing our monthly checkup and say, okay, where we're at, there would always be like something else on the spreadsheet. It's like, where did that come from? Yeah. Like, I thought we were done with that.
And the same goes if you have a partner or a spouse. If you guys are tied together and things in your names together, you need to check on that too, to make sure that theirs is good as well.
Need to talk about money.
Yep.
Well, that goes back to the being honest and taking the full assessment, like reassess. You had a great blessing in that your wife was willing to 100% on board.
Yeah.
Like from day one, she was right there. Yep, let's do this. So that was a big blessing.
But I also say it's a blessing too that we had someone like you guys and you willing to help us. I've met a lot of people in the past who are well off, and they've never once shared any of their secret sauce, so to speak. You know, you were very open and transparent with that, and that's a good trait, in my opinion, to want everyone else to succeed. That's great.
Yep. So what we did is we took all of the credit cards that were on there and all the student loans, the car payments, everything. And we took the one that was the highest interest rate, regardless of the total amount. We've narrowed in on those. And then from there, we took the ones that were the easiest ones to pay it off. When you paid off your first card, you had it where you had some extra money because you didn't have the payment anymore. What did I do with that first payment?
We rolled it right back into the next highest interest rate.
And then when we did that one, what did we do with the next card?
Same thing.
And then when you had some extra money off of that, what do we do with your actual budget?
We revised the budget to start trying to knock down as much debt as we can.
How'd you feel about me increasing your car maintenance every single time?
It was interesting. That's another important thing too. I don't think people really consider that too much. You should always make sure that you have enough in there for your vehicles, because that's like the number one problem that people have with work. You have a vehicle issue, and most people, unfortunately, don't even have enough in the bank for a repair, a major repair. So when your vehicle's broke down, how do you get to work?
It's the number 2 expense people deal with. We're at a point now where, like I said, you're in control of your finances, so things are looking up. How does that feel?
Feels great. Feels really great. Driving on my way to work, that's my deep thought moments with my music and deep thought, and it feels good to keep reminding myself about the light at the end of the tunnel. Because at first, you know, you don't feel it, and you've said it to me multiple times. You know, I think you could probably tell by the comments on my face while we're talking about it that I'm not as excited as you.
Yeah, Rob was like, this sucks.
Remind me all the time, like you're getting closer, you don't even see it. And then the day we started cutting up credit cards, you know, my wife actually got emotional. She's like, it's happening, we're doing it.
There was a couple points, you weren't in on these calls, I told you about them, but where he's just like, I don't see it. I'm seeing all the numbers go down. I'm like doing all this nerd math behind the scenes thinking, he's got it, it's right there. Then Rob calls me, goes, I don't know if I can do this. I'm like, you're right. You're so fair. It's like, just wait.
If you were here, I would have smacked you.
It does take, I mean, it almost feels like one of the things that you're saying is you need a support person, like somebody to help guide you through that, to say, look, you can actually make this happen. I'm hoping we're getting across the message to the audience. One of the things that we're going to do in some future videos is we're going to take through the steps that we helped Rob eliminate just about all of his debt and get out from underneath that. We're going to post this in future videos so people can understand, how do you even start? And that's sometimes, that's the hardest thing. Like I just said earlier, going to the gym, just figuring out what do you do? Get on the treadmill? Do you do curls? What is the exercise that's the most effective? That doesn't matter. None of that matters. The fact is that you're there.
Right. You showed up.
Yeah, you showed up. And with the financial, just resetting that, the important thing I want people to understand is he showed up, he was there, he did the spreadsheet, he was all in, and he stayed committed. And that's hard to do, especially in today's culture of everything's instant gratification. And making a lifestyle change for finance is not an easy thing to do, because there's some reality checks in there.
Right.
And especially when you're living underneath my crushing thumb of finance.
Cheapness.
Yes. This all stuff looks all fancy, but I am notoriously cheap. Some of the stuff that I would put Rob through, and anybody through really, is part of that reality check. And that's a hard thing to stomach. So, yeah, kudos to you for doing that, because not everybody can do that. But you're getting there. You're going to be free soon. We'll do another video follow-up for everybody to see where Rob's at. Probably we'll do one in a few months, then we'll do one again, past the winter time, and just see where things are going. But like I said, thank you for putting yourself out there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Make sure that you vet the person who's your mentor. Clearly you guys, you're at where you need to be, and you're doing very well. And you've been very transparent with that, Tom, and that's what helped build a lot of the trust, your transparency, and showing me your dividends and your portfolio. And I will say, the first time I saw that, my jaw dropped. I'm like, okay, yeah, this guy knows what he's doing. So I would suggest anybody who thinks that this stuff is too difficult, don't think that way. Be open-minded and dive into the dividend dudes. This is legit. It's free knowledge to help you become a millionaire. So why would you not take it? I don't understand why anybody would not
I think if
take the
people had to,
information.
I think if people had an answer for that, Warren Buffett wouldn't be asking the same question.
And we didn't pay him to say that, folks.
Yeah, we didn't say.
No, it's legit, folks. So I would definitely stay tuned.
Yeah, more to come. Thank you for watching, everybody, and we'll put together some finance videos following the exact steps. I push Rob through in a much more concise way than is typical for me.
Right.
As always, happy investing.
Happy investing.